Observation 1 is the resolution analysis. The A point is the resolution. The United States federal government should significantly increase its efforts to eradicate mosquitoes in one or more of the following countries: the United States, Brazil, Indonesia, and or Sudan. The B point is the way this policy rounds up popular or should in the resolutions the mechanisms for this round should be net benefits. The C point is the background. The first argument is that in 1962 the Pan American Health Coalition, which is an international coalition, undertook steps to eliminate the Aedes aegypti mosquito strain from tropical areas. They eliminated it from 18 countries, including Brazil, effectively cutting the number of mosquitoes of like this type of mosquito like all the way down to zero. In fact, this type of mosquito is responsible for spreading malaria, dengue, fever, Zika, and also it also was like one of the tiny ones that pollinates, but there are 3,000 other ones of those. The B point under this argument is that there were no side effects to the environment that were viewed because there were like literally 2,999 other types of mosquitoes that were still existent within Brazil, which has one of the most important biodiversity, which has some of the most biodiversity in the world, which means that there's no real scenario for environmental collapse with with any one given mosquito. The second background argument, the biological reproduction is the current scientific theory for the best method of going for eradication of mosquitoes. The little Andrews between 2009 and 2010 in the Cayman Islands, they tested a method of biological reproduction which basically eliminated the ability for mosquitoes to have developed offspring. And they saw that the number of mosquitoes within the area that they tested dropped by 96% and infected the entire island by 92%, which means that in a very small area it has very effective spillover effects to the greater area. The point under this second argument, under the second link argument, is that there was also no biology impact because there was just one type of mosquito over here, and there's just so many different types of mosquitoes they're able to pollinate the environment, not pollute the environment. The third background argument is that there are three main types of mosquitoes that are responsible for the transmission of a lot of mosquito-borne diseases. They are the Aedes aegypti mosquito brand, the Aedes albopictus mosquito brand, and then the Anopheles gambiae strain. Three strains. But there are also more than 3,000 different strains globally, but these are the three that are responsible for an overwhelming majority of mosquito-borne diseases. This is plan text. Plan. United States federal government will develop and deploy modified, insert affirmative 3 mosquito branches there, species using genetic modification techniques designed to halt offspring development through National Science Foundation grants in the United States, Brazil, Indonesia, and Sudan. Are there any questions on that? Would you like me to repeat it one more time, maybe?
Develop and deploy.
Yeah, basically just
make mosquitoes that have these genetic modifications and put them into places.
Yeah.
Can you repeat it?
Yeah, United States federal government will develop and deploy modified, those three names, using genetic modification designed to halt offspring development through National Science Foundation grants in the United States, Brazil, and Indonesia, Sudan. A couple plan advantages. First one is public health. The A point is unique. It's the first argument that these mosquitoes are responsible for killing most people from mosquito-borne diseases. The little androgens that combine for more than 90% of all mosquito-borne diseases and deaths. They are responsible for transmitting Zika, yellow fever, and dengue in the developing world and in the United States. The second unique argument is that public health in these countries is low and they are under-equipped to deal with these issues. The little androgens, Indonesia has 28 million people below the poverty line, and they have really problematic public health systems. These, in fact, for like 15 years, the top 3 hazards that the World Health Organization has been rating for Indonesia are dengue, yellow fever, and I didn't write the third one down because it's not mosquito-borne, and HIV, which is really important because they haven't made any substantive steps to quell their ability to solve all these disease-borne things. The second argument is it's been really problematic for Indonesia because they haven't had any investment into their economy because of internal problems, which has made their public health system not grow at all, which means that people have just been getting more and more left behind as they're unable to get health care because they are unable to afford it, but they also are the health systems that are in place are unable to help resolve mosquito-borne impacts. The second argument is Sudan suffers from poor water quality, which makes mosquitoes growing really easy over there because mosquitoes tend to grow in stagnant water, which Sudan has a lot of, which means that there's a lot of mosquito development and growth, especially within these 3 different mosquito branches. You've seen an increase in the number of people that have been dying from dengue fever in Sudan over the last couple of years because of stagnant water increases through problems getting water moving through the different rivers that flow through it. Additionally, Brazil has faced trade-off problems since they eliminated the Aedes aegypti mosquito branch in 1964. They have seen the other 2 that we found come over from one is from Asia and the other is from Africa, come back in to Brazil, which then has caused a lot of systemic impacts, which means that it is necessary to attack all three of them if you want to attain total solvency, because otherwise you just get trade-off between the other ones, which means you don't solve the links. The first argument of the plan works, you can cross apply my pen solvency over here, which is it took less than a year for any reduction of mosquitoes, which means that there's a really short time frame on this, which means you're seeing a lot of people getting cured, which means you're seeing a lot of people like not getting diagnosed with these things anymore because you're not getting them, because they're not getting communities in the first place. The second argument is hospital stabilization, because dengue fever, which is one of the things that which is one of the most commonly spread by mosquitoes, is impossible to self-diagnose, which means you need to go to a hospital to get diagnosed first, which means that if people aren't getting the symptoms in the first place, they don't need to go to hospitals, which means that the hospital resources, which a lot of which is spent on just diagnosis, much less treatment, go away in the first place because people aren't getting needed to get diagnosed anymore. So while the number of people that have, like dengue might not go down, the number of people that are then getting it in the future, will go down dramatically, which means that the money that they're spending that would be on, diagnosis is now spent on helping people out. The second argument over here is that this helps doctors understand how human responses to viruses and other stuff works, because they were able to see over a long period of time how do modifications to these organisms help affect the human body. The third link is that once you've filled out all of is that you need to eliminate all three, because otherwise, each successive level just gets replaced by another one unless you kill all three out. Impacts. The first impact is health, where if you were able to solve a lot of the mosquito-borne impacts, you are able to resolve a lot of the other health impacts that are facing this country right now. We would isolate specifically HIV and AIDS within Indonesia and in Sudan as really important issues in this case, because they take a lot of resources as well to treat. HIV and AIDS are lifelong conditions that require constant treatment, which means that if you're always taking people with their diagnosis, you aren't able to effectively treat these long-term patients who have long-term illnesses. The second impact is hospital collapse, because pesticides. Hospital collapse is not important. I didn't say that. The second impact is pesticides, which happens because a lot of people right now are using tons and tons of pesticides in the status quo, especially within these countries, which rely primarily on agriculture to kill mosquitoes, because otherwise they don't want their families and stuff to get dengue or yellow fever, which means that they're contaminating their crops, and pesticides are responsible for 130,000 lives deaths globally because of food poisoning through pesticides that aren't effectively extracted from these foods, which means that if you remove the main thing that is causing people to need to use pesticides in food agriculture, then there's no more people that are then dying from pesticide poisoning.
Case. You'll want to have the, there's like a sheet of solvency answers. You can just throw that on the inherency sheet.
On the what sheet?
Inherency sheet.
Okay, yeah. Just sign those as you go, please.
Okay. A is the interpretation of mosquitoes in the resolution is a plural noun, which means in the resolution, which means that it is not quantified, which means that the affirmative must defend all a general mosquito eradication, not just three specific types. The violation is that they defend only the eradication of three specific types. C is the standard first textual accuracy. The lack of an article before the word mosquitoes means that you must defend the general ban of mosquitoes in general. For example, if I were to give you the argument that dogs are red, but then I showed you like a example about my dog, and I showed you that my dog is red, that still does not prove the resolution true that dogs are red, which is an indication as to how they don't actually even meet the affirmative burden, which is prove the resolution true, because they only prove that these three specific mosquito types should be banned, but they do not prove the resolution about how mosquitoes should be banned is true, which means that you don't have the jurisdiction as a judge to actually vote on this, because they don't actually finally uphold the resolution and meet the affirmative burden. In addition, the second argument is going to be that the lack of the specification to only three types of mosquitoes cuts off all night ground, because they are able to specifically pick from this. We are losing massive ground to literally, they tell you 2,500 different types of mosquitoes. We lose ground to all the arguments under this, which is an independent reason to vote against them, because they are cutting off 2,500 species of our arguments, probably really important. That's linking to availability, which is key to checking back for education. In addition,
competing interest first.
oh yeah, no. Any other standards you want me to go for?
Yeah, competing interest first.
Next are the voters. First is fairness. So the only reason we do this debate in education is the only reason schools fund this, and competing interest over reasonability, because reasonability is encouraged judgment intervention is a race to the bottom. In addition, is drop the debater, because topicality is a drop the debater voting issue. In addition, evaluate the rules of debate before debate. Anything else on that? I think.
No.
No. Okay. Next is mosquitoes good. Oh. uniqueness is that currently mosquitoes populations are actually being controlled in status quo. Most of the countries that they talk about, for example, the U.S. and Indonesia, and even Sudan actually have mosquito eradication programs. They tell you themselves that, like, for example, Brazil was actually able to eradicate one type of species of mosquitoes completely. The indication is that how they currently are able to eradicate these species already. And in addition, there's actually already a very low risk of all these problems. They don't isolate these problems. The specific word for this is that there's actually a 70%, like bed nets are able to solve for most of these. Like bed nets are able to solve for 70% of actually mosquito bites that are in these countries, mosquito-borne diseases in these countries, which means that bed nets are also solving back for mosquitoes in the status quo. In addition, the third argument is going to be that mosquito-borne diseases actually have been decreasing over the status over the past 10 years. November 8th study actually proved that on average there are very few cases of actually mosquito-borne diseases in these developing nations anymore. And in addition, that's the uniqueness via the links. They eradicate these 3 mosquitoes. There are a few problems with this, however, because these mosquito larvae are very critical to the food population, the fish food population. We will isolate the mosquito fish in particular, but in addition, more importantly, they're actually a very important food source for migratory birds because these migratory birds require these type of populations of mosquitoes. But probably the most important link is the concept of crossbreeding between these mosquitoes. That's inevitable, especially when you release these types of mosquitoes into the environment, which means that even though they try and make these 3 specific types of mosquitoes infertile, they're still going to spill over to other mosquitoes, and that's going to be a very bad problem because that functionally means that the app is pretty much eliminating all mosquitoes because the crossbreeding eventually will mean that they eliminate all mosquitoes because the crossbreeding means that now a bunch of things are infertile, which means that people are not going to be able to do this. And this is going to be really bad because you can look to the the migratory birds argument is going to be really important. It's going to be important because a nature study actually showed that a decrease in these amount of mosquitoes would actually lead to a halving of the migratory bird population, which is going to be especially key because migratory birds are probably a keystone species because they transport nutrients between inner ecosystems, which is going to be a reason as to why if you decrease the amount of migratory birds by half, that's going to ultimately lead to ecosystem collapse, and that's really bad for the environment because that's only leading to biodiversity loss, which ultimately leads to extinction because biodiversity loss. If species has massive loss, that ultimately impacts the food chain, and you have the massive species dying off. Next is the counterplan. The USFG should substantially increase funding for the production and distribution of those vaccines for yellow fever, dengue fever, whatever they isolate in the AF, you got that. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, the USFG should substantially increase funding for distribution and production of the vaccines for those things, and obviously in those countries. This is probably going to be able to resolve for the entirety of the app in addition, at the end, it's probably able to resolve the entirety of the affirmative advantage because they only talk about how public health is going to be really important. I'll get onto these pesticides arguments later, but this is fundamentally able to resolve all the impacts as to how people are getting sick right now because we are able to preemptively prevent any of these diseases from spreading. Yeah.
Status?
Conditional. What else?
Yeah. Do you know if these vaccines exist as well, or are you also funding research into them?
Production and distribution. Some of them exist. For example, the Zika virus, malaria viruses all exist already. The yellow fever is mostly preventative. On the solvency sheet, there are a few problems with how they're able to enforce this. First, international intervention, like the distribution of these mosquitoes, excludes all local authorities, which means that they are not actually able to see if A, this is even working to check back, but in addition B, there's a failure to distribute this because the international actors bypass the local actors which know the community and how to distribute these things the best. The second argument is going to be that this increase in mosquito aid is actually going to be increasing the amount of aid volatility because there's these fiscally because the irresponsible governments in some of these countries will probably not be able to handle all this aid properly. In addition, so like they're not able to solve for this because like the massive increase in aid to these countries means that they're not really able to handle the implementation of the distribution of all these mosquitoes properly. On the advantage for first advantage. They talk about how a lot of mosquitoes are transmitting things. First, you can cross-apply the uniqueness. As to how most mosquitoes are actually decreasing the status quo. Indication as to how mosquito eradication programs are already working. They talk about how all 3 mosquitoes need to be isolated, and they're probably going to use this as to how eradication programs are not working in the status quo. But that's an indication as to how pretty much the countries in the status quo would eliminate these already. They talk about how one was eliminated, another took over, and they eliminated that one as well. Indication that status quo solves completely. They would continue to do this. In addition, they say that pesticides are bad. That's probably going to be the big argument that they go for. But no, pesticides are not going to be decreasing, especially at the point in which we're increasing the amount of GMOs in most of these developing countries, which means that we're practically incentivizing a lot of these countries to use more pesticides and use more insecticides. Probably means that your impact is entirely non-unique. In addition, they say that, what else do I need on this?
There's another solvency argument. They defend all the countries, but solvency is contextual to each country, which
Oh yeah, also in addition, there's no clear solvency argument because they defend the implementation of the use of this to all countries, but there's like every single country has a different type of solvency mechanism. Probably means that they have a inherent solvency deficit at the point in which they like don't specify the solvency for every single country. And the counterplan is able to resolve for the diseases.
No enforcement.
And there's no enforcement because when we put these mosquitoes out there, we never know if this was working. So you vote on T and then risk of this out.
There's
Okay.
a T for me.
No.
So you're welcome to as well. Anyways, so order is going to be the DA, CP, solvency, public health. I'm probably going to hit theory on the bottom, though it might come somewhere in the middle when Neeraj gets his shit together, and if I'm running out of time, and then possibly a new sheet on the bottom. Any questions?
You should get started though, so Neeraj has less time.
I mean, that'd be nice for you. Let's see. Anybody not ready? Time starts now. Okay, there's a few arguments on mosquitoes good. First is that Bennett solved the only argument he makes is that it reduces 70% of mosquito bites. My argument is the only one mosquito bite that actually get infected, right? Even if you're having 30% mosquito bites, even if you're having a 70% decrease, you're still getting a whole bunch of infectious diseases. The other argument is that you're seeing widespread implementation of bed nets. You're still not solving. You still see these three things that are, mosquito-borne illnesses, one of the biggest causes of death in the world. The next argument that makes the diseases are decreasing the status quo. The argument right here is that they're still one of the biggest causes of death in the world, right? Dengue, yellow fever, and whatever the third one is. Three of the four biggest causes of death in the world. Even if it's decreasing slowly, we've done prevention efforts in the past, and we've been doing them for a long time. They still haven't actually decreased. We still haven't decreased in its given cause of death. You can say they're decreasing in the status quo, but the analysis is that they're going to decrease, and they might decrease to zero over time. But it's probably going to take 50, 60 years. In that meantime, millions and millions of people are going to die, right? The fact that the app solves immediately, and the fact that it's immediate is the key part of the app. The status quo is solving very, very slowly. Next, they make this argument about how, yes?
Wait, so can you give a time frame as to how long it takes for like these genetically modified mosquitoes to like crossbreed with everyone and like destroy this mosquito population?
So first, they don't crossbreed because the species is defined by the ability to.
I'll get to that.
Okay.
But can you give a time frame?
Yeah. So I read solvency that says 1 year. So 1 year.
Yeah. That's like Cayman Islands, pick or whatever. The next argument they read is that like mosquito larvae are actually key to fish. Our argument here is that these three types of mosquitoes are not the only type of mosquitoes. They specifically read like the T-shell that there's 2,000 other types of mosquitoes or 3,000 or whatever. It means they can actually get larvae from these types of mosquitoes. Most mosquitoes don't actually bite humans, meaning you're not actually going to be seeing these infectious diseases. We're only targeting mosquitoes that are actually doing the infectious diseases in and of themselves. They make this argument that the kind of modification that we're making are going to spill over into other species. Our argument specifically doesn't happen empirically. Look at the Cayman Islands empirically. Neera reads you. The second argument is that species are defined specifically in that they can't crossbreed. Right? That's how a species is defined. Crossbreeding doesn't really happen because otherwise they'd be the same species. Yes. Cool. Oh, also, there was a study in Nature published by Jeanette Fisher around a year ago that basically says that all the things the ecosystems actually ate, mosquito larvae and so on and so forth, had other sources of food they could rely on, meaning that you not actually see this huge collapse in the ecosystem. This is specifically in Nature, a really respected scientific journal, pretty much the most prestigious scientific journal anyone can publish in. CP. First, the permutation, do the plan, and the counterplan. Pretty simple, right? Our argument is specifically that, they're both good. We still have like 5% of mosquitoes hanging around after mosquito eradication. Vaccines solve for that. But the problem with vaccines is it's really hard to distribute, specifically because you need like ice-chilled containers, and it's really hard to actually vaccinate everybody, especially in countries like Sudan, where there's not like a central government registry system, meaning you're actually not actually going to be able to get everybody to vaccinate everybody. We've been trying to create vaccinations for a long, long time, and the WHO has not actually succeeded in vaccinating against these diseases, meaning you're still seeing these huge outbreaks of disease that are causing millions of deaths every year. Yeah?
Plan solves better than counterplan alone because of herd immunity. Herd immunity. If
Right. Plan cells better than counterplan alone, specifically because in order to actually have vaccines be super effective, you actually need there's people that can't actually take vaccines, such as old people or children. In order to actually have vaccines, you need to actually you need to actually immunize like most of the population up to like 98%. You can actually do that in these countries that we're talking about. The next argument is the no actual vaccine for dengue. Millions of deaths they can't solve for. That's a unique advantage to the plan. Next go to the solvency arguments, the top case. They make this argument specifically we exclude local actors, that we can't like distribute the mosquitoes. Like we're literally just like releasing 100 mosquitoes into Sudan. It's not hard. They also make this argument that we can't actually monitor them. You know, who cares? You know, if the plan doesn't work, the plan doesn't work. But you know, it doesn't. You know, we just put more mosquitoes in. You know, we just go and like capture mosquitoes in Sudan. It's really easy to monitor. You just do like rate studies in like a specific area. It's fine. The next argument they make is that these countries can't handle aid. We don't actually make any specific argument about aid. We're making an argument about like hospital collapse, right? You know, and they don't actually warn or impact us out in any way. You shouldn't be buying this. And you know, we're literally just releasing mosquitoes into the wild. That's all we're doing. We're not giving aid. If anything, this is a disadvantage to the counterplan, specifically because you're actually giving vaccine aid. Yeah.
The answer to international intervention, that is not how you do it, because no matter what, solvency is the same everywhere.
Yeah, no matter what, solvency is the same.
Okay.
Right? If you're doing injection prevention.
Remember the argument. Okay. Cross-apply the little a
Actually,
under
that's left.
little a under 2. Little a under
Cross-apply little a under 2, just like Meera says. Okay, go to the public health or the public health advantage. The only thing they do is cross-apply disadvantage 1. Like I've answered that already. The next argument they go for is that like GMOs means that pesticide use is going to go up in status quo. We specifically make the argument you're decreasing pesticide use in this one instance that isn't affected by GMOs, like spraying to actually hurt mosquitoes, means that even if it's linear, it's still a pretty big disadvantage, right? Next. Counter-interpretation of mosquitoes allows for parameterization to specific species of mosquitoes. The first standard is imitative regression. There's any number of plurals that could be interpreted in any ways, like efforts to eradicate is super vague. You know, it's basically non-unique. We can already use efforts to eradicate to just about any other type of plan, right? The B argument is research burden. Specifically, this is, our interpretation allows for the most topic education by actually talking about things that are specific to the topic that actually mimic released efforts in the past. Brazil has actually done this. We cite this. Means this is super predictable. Specifically, we meet the interpretation because we isolate all mosquitoes, which breeds most harmful way in the status quo. Like mosquitoes is just a plural, right? It just refer to like 2 mosquitoes that we're trying to eradicate. It doesn't need to refer to species. It doesn't need to refer to mosquitoes as a whole.
Your interpret is probably bad for education because it allows us to debate things that don't exist within the harm of the status quo.
Your interpretation is probably bad because it allows us to debate things that don't actually exist in our harms within the status quo. This specifically means not actually getting education about the real world isn't trained to be policymakers. We say specifically education comes first because it's the only thing they actually lead with. Gives you into the real world as an adult. Fairness about and knowledge of rules about debate doesn't actually do anything. You need education. Go on to the standards level.
Read
AirAF specifically because they get 13 minutes to respond to theory in the block. We only get 5 minutes to respond to the PMC. Go on to their standards level. They say we don't meet the burden as the day after. We say we meet, and they say they destroy all day ground. And then they read disads. Like they have relations disads they can do. They have specific disads. These type of mosquitoes. RF is super predictable. Meaning they should be able to generate these disads off the type of mosquitoes specifically because it's been implemented in the past.
Need to set it correctly. Okay. The order is Nebelty, the vaccine counterplan. Actually, Nebelty, case, vaccines counterplan, decide. There will be an overview on T.
Wait, can you repeat the order, please?
Yeah. So T, case, counterplan, decide. Overview on T. Alright. Is that one good?
No.
The first framing issue on T is the concession of competing interests first. This means you evaluate the T debate on based on whose interest is net better, not whose interest allows for sufficient ground. It's not a question of sufficient ground or their interest being sufficiently good. They only have mitigatory defense as responses to every single argument on the interest. They have no offense on theory, given that you've conceded competing interests and you have no offense. You can sign the ballot for the negative right now. It's not a question of whether the counter interest is sufficiently good. It's a question of whose interest is best. So, line by line. Extend the interpretation. Mosquito eradication is an infinitive verb in the resolution, which means they must defend mosquito eradication in the general sense. They may not defend the eradication of specific types of mosquitoes. We'll give them the first interval extend is ground. There are 2,500 different types of mosquitoes. We don't get to read distance to any of those types of mosquitoes. We only get distance to 3 types of mosquitoes. To 3 types of mosquitoes. That overlimits our ground. This is empirically proven. It's empirically proven that we can't go for the biodiversity discount because they spiked out of that in the 1EC by saying, oh, we only defend these 3, which means there's no link to biodiversity. Biodiversity is a core aspect of a topic in which we're literally eliminating an entire animal race, which means that this is a prime example. We can't read an entire class of disadvantage. Also, this loss of ground was any compensator ground that might give us. First, classify the argument about how biodiversity is a key aspect of the topic in which we're eliminating animals. Second, this question of an entire class of distats eliminated. Even if we get new specific types of isolated distats. That does not solve for the lack of an entire class of distats that we lose. Third, is just a question of quantity. We lose 2,497 types of distats, whereas you give us maybe 3. Thanks. Yeah, 3 definitely compensates for 2,497. That is a false argument, which means that just quantitatively we lose massive amounts of ground. Also, air neg on T1. When the F gets picks the F, especially in Parliament when we don't have any prep to read generics, and they get to make their case in the first 20 minutes, especially with since there's no prep before the 1 and C. If the F is if the F underlimit, they should have to defend the broadest possible interpretation of the resolution, because if they get to underlimit, because there's a unique risk of underlimiting. You have to defending super squirrely apps, and then none of the 20 minutes we had to prep applies, and Ryan has to sit up and give a 7-minute speech based on no preparation on a super squirrely app that no one talks about. Also, the other argument for air app on T is that the block that's 2 error speaks last one actually knows that this is times Q1. These 2 error speak slash which probably outweighs time scheme. It's not a question of structural. It's not a question of structural. It's not a question of structural fairness. It's just you can speak faster, be more efficient with solves. Whereas there's literally no way to mitigate the fact that the F has the last word in the debate. And science people learn most in the first 5 minutes of school day, which means the teachers probably paying more attention to 2 error as well. Additionally, additionally air off on T, air neg on T, because they get to pick the app, and we have no way of predicting it. They get to set the terms of the debate. Also, they get to sandbag. They get to stand on arguments for the 2 error, which means there's definitely a bias against a negative and probably debate. Also, a 12-minute block doesn't solve, since we're not allowed to split the block in probably debate, which means there's functionally no advantage to having 12 minutes as opposed to 5 minutes if the second speech in the block is just limited to weighing and framing issues, which could Also, we'll be crushing on T so hard there won't be any room to air app or air neg. It'll be a clear neg ballot. The airing arguments only apply if the T debate is relatively close, which it won't be. All right. Now let's go to their intro. They say infinite regress first. No infinite regress. Our interpretation is specific to there's a specific article. There's a specific grammatical structure in the resolution that exists for one word that does not exist for the other words. So there's no infinite regress for the other words in the resolution, because our interval only applies to one specific word in the resolution. The specific grammatical structure is the lack of articles before mosquito eradication. Is the lack of articles before mosquito eradication. Second is that what?
How can you have a plural noun if you have the singular article a before? So it's a mosquito eradication or mosquito eradication.
The point is that we say a plural, not plural. So the point is that the noun of the resolution is generic. It's not quantified. If you said if the noun of the resolution is generic, it's not quantified. If they said, for example, the second part of the resolution says 1 or more countries, that is an example of a quantified noun that does not depend. That is not limited to 1. That's why we didn't read an interp that you must only defend one country. You must defend all countries, because that is clearly specified in the resolution. This is also another answer against the infinite regress. This is empirical proof against the infinite regress argument. Also, second, I'll take that later. Also, second, infinite regress gets checked back by other arguments in debate. Obviously, if people read knowledge of theory, you should just answer it. Third, they never impact infinite regress. If theory interpret is false, you can just answer it. Four, any other answers? I mean, I can't say infinite regress.
No.
Okay.
Alright.
Then now they say, topic education first. Fairness outweighs education. A, axiomatic principle of any principle of any competitive activity. B,
Clear.
it's an axiomatic principle of any competitive activity. Debate is literally not debate unless both sides have unless both sides have a chance to win the round. Otherwise, it's just two sides talking past each other. B, fairness is the key to adjudicate truth. You don't know whether any of the opposite is true if we weren't able to engage it because it was unfair, which means that fairness comes first. C, unfair debate is uneducational debate. If we're not given an equal chance to engage, both sides cannot make educational arguments in the first place. D, education is not unique. Other forms solve for education, whereas fairness literally defines debate in this space. Now, also more answers to the link on topic education. First, the app overlimits topic education. There are 3,000 other different species of mosquitoes that we should discuss instead of just one specific species of mosquito. Second is that the argument that more authors talk about these three specific mosquito species is non-verifiable. They never read any cards on them, and it's impossible to present any evidence on this question. Third, there's no reason why we should limit the debate to these standards to what is set by experts for us. Broadening the discussion is key. Now, this education has a lasting impact. That's probably not true, especially in this form of debate where we don't do in-depth research on the topic. We only debated for like an hour. Now, let's also go for the textuality argument. They say let's also go for the textuality argument. You don't have the jurisdiction to vote on the app because it is question of a generic noun, which means that just having 3 doesn't solve because it's not for the rest of the mosquitoes that exist, which means there's also no solvency to the app.
My mind's blown.
Conceded out of 1 and C, the textual accuracy explanation as to how they are not even upholding the fundamental burden of the affirmative by proving the resolution true. They have conceded the analysis as to how, when you talk about how mosquitoes should be banned, or mosquitoes should be eradicated, just saying that 3 mosquitoes should be eradicated is not a fundamental upholding of how mosquitoes in general should be eradicated, because mosquitoes in the infinitive term refers to a general ban in mosquitoes. I think Jake Neagle would agree with me, but in addition, this is like, they are severely limiting our ground, which is able to turn all their arguments as to their counter standards about research burden and about how this is bad for education, because if we don't even have access to the ground, that means we are not ever able to get access to topic education, which means ground controls the internal link to all of their counter standards. In addition, that's why you prefer the ground standard first. And in addition, when they talk about standard research burden, don't let them go for the research burden counter standard, because they only have to specify a tiny little one, affirmative, while we have to research literally every single type of mosquito that they can spike out of. Probably means it's a reason that's a standard for us. Yeah.
So the argument of like ground is internal to all our standards, and therefore the controls those standards themselves is a new argument coming out of the PMR or with the LOR. Long.
All right. Well, the response is that this is comparing the standards between ground and research burden, and then when we lose ground, that ultimately means that increases our research burden because we don't even know what you're going to be reading in the affirmative. We're not sure what you're going to read.
Functions as a term.
Yeah.
Do internal analysis.
Okay. Up to the judges. That means that the 2 winning standards are probably enough to win the interpretation, or winning the interpretation. In addition, they have no defense on competing interpretations versus reasonability, which means that you're going to be preferring competing interpretations. And in general, this is probably going to be a better method for the debate. Specifically, the analysis that my partner brings up as to how Parley is a 20-minute prep event, not a extremely high level like prep event where you get the topic 2 months in advance. Probably an indication as to how the infinitive term of the word mosquitoes is a very important topic. Is very important for actually defining it. In addition, the resolution proves this interpretation true itself. It tells you that it must be implemented in 1 or more countries, not just countries, but 1 or more countries, and then that is where you would be able to specify multiple things, or 1 thing, or 2 things, or 3 things. But the use of mosquitoes in just one sense means that it is a generic infinitive term, which means that under textual precision, this is just a generic general ban of mosquitoes in general. Okay.
Also, textual precision is not a priori issue because it's jurisdiction.
All right, yeah. Also, textual precision, you evaluate this first because it's a jurisdiction argument. The jurisdiction argument that comes out of the 1NC means that you are not able to evaluate anything else until you determine what the resolution actually fundamentally asks you to affirm. Now, let's just really clearly explain the analysis about how dogs are red, because dogs are not red. But if the resolution says dogs are red, but then I pick you 1 dog, that's my dog, and that is red, that still does not prove dogs are red. Just because, or even 2 or 3 dogs, that does not show that dogs are red. That means that ultimately you're not able to vote on the resolution vote on the resolution as being true, which is what the affirmative is trying to prove, because they do not prove that mosquitoes, the infinitive term of mosquito, should be banned, because it's not specified. The lack of an article, a mosquito, 2 mosquitoes, 3 mosquitoes, all mosquitoes. Nothing of there, they are specifying it's in the infinitive mosquitoes, which which means lack of an article means that you misspecify make a general defense. And I think Varun is doing pretty good analysis as to why you're going to be erring neg on T. But in addition, all the predictable, the ground arguments and the textual accuracy arguments are what are going to be controlling all their things, because this is what gives us access to predictability. Because again, the analysis as to how partly is a uniquely low low prep time event means that it's probably better if you actually defend the general implementation instead of actually over giving you way too much ground and limiting our ground completely, which means that we also control control education as the voter. Honestly, this is pretty much what we're going to be voting on right here.
Also, no impact to predictability ever articulated in the 2AC.
Yeah. Also, no impact to predictability or how infinitely regressive impacts would be articulated in the MG. Anything else on this?
Just some more stuff on infinite regress.
Okay. I mean, I think you do good. I think you do more than enough on that. This is not infinitely regressive because they don't actually specify what infinitely regressive looks like, so you probably shouldn't evaluate the standard really highly because like even if they tell you, oh, this could result in like the affirmative choosing like 100,000 plans, they don't actually specify like how this would be actually solved. And in addition, there's a lot of arguments as to how like the neg would probably be able to solve back for this, or no, the neg wouldn't be able to solve back for this. So yeah, in general, vote on T. We're ahead on the textual accuracy standards. The use of the mosquitoes term is a plural. Or is a infinitive term, which means that they must defend a general mosquito ban. And yeah.
Okay. We're just going to be focusing on fourth argument that Leah read, which was a we meet. Start time now. We read a we meet, which they don't read any responses to in the block at all. He reads we meet their interpretation because we isolate the mosquito breeds that are the most harmful ones in the status quo. The resolution comes from a place of questioning the harms of the status quo. If the negative is not able to isolate harms, then there is no reason that you should be debating on these topics. The resolution asks for a change versus a defense to not change. They don't ask you to debate on things that are a consensus not to be changed, which means that the resolution comes from a place of asking the affirmative team to isolate the mosquitoes that are most likely to want to be changed. The burden of the affirmative team is to propose a plan that changes the status quo in some meaningful way, and the only way that we are able to impact out is through our definition of mosquitoes, which they concede our we meet to. This becomes extremely problematic because that means that no matter what they say on the standards level, we meet their interpretation, which means that they read no in and
Point of order.
Oh wow.
Alright, this we meet is new in the final speech, and I don't know how this works. And it's also fundamentally not flagged in the first speech as a response to the specific violation that we articulate. This is new contextualization of the we meet. That's illegitimate, encourages sandbagging, bad debate.
So I wrote out the term Leo for Leo to say we meet, which he then read at the bottom of his counter-interpretation standards, which I personally intend to flow top to bottom. So the articulation of the word we meet is enough of a red flag for you to understand that this argument is a we meet to the violation. All right?
So if I say impact turn at the...
You don't get a response to this, I'm sorry. All right?
Yeah,
Like it's a point of order, there's no back and forth. Which means at the point where they have conceded a we meet to their interpretation, there is no way for us to be biting into any of their theory standards over here. Let's go to the line by line.
I also think the specific argument, like mosquitoes is a plural, could just refer to like two
Yeah,
mosquitoes.
he made the argument that mosquitoes is a plural could be referring to two mosquitoes. In fact, he makes the analysis that the resolution also includes the infinitive term effects, or like efforts over here. And the fact that we were able to parametricize down to one specific defect on this probably means that there is not enough distinction between the parametricization on this specific topic versus our method of implementation, which probably means that there's no reason to be voting on this T alone. All right? Okay. Let's go to their second standard, which they say was like there's like lack of net ground. The main argument over here is that you can still debate under our ground. Leo gives you like 4 different arguments that you possibly could have read. You could have read counter plans picking out of one of these specific types. You could have read relation system managers. These are all potential affirmatives that you could have counted by just looking up what the type of mosquito that is responsible for transmitting Zika is on Google. This all comes from the first thing. It's very predictable, and there's tons of ground that you're able to debate on. Additionally, this ground is very high quality. You make the argument that this ground is not high quality because you lose out to the access to the other types, 2,500, but the implementation of the plan is extremely important. At the point at which you read like even solvency deficit arguments on the plan text against that, You say this eliminates an entire class of disadvantage. We say that no, it does not, especially because you read biodiversity advantages against our plan text. You read the fact that you're able to read the text and that we have to make substantive responses to this in order to be winning the round probably means that our plan text has some risk of linking to the disadvantage, which means that there's no reason to be preferring their statement basically which eliminates an entire class of disadvantage. The plan does not cut out any of that stuff. On our standards, the first argument that they read is that there's no infinite regression, but at the point at which you can say that there are 3,000 other types of mosquitoes that you could be reading on, you can expand that out just within one specific phylum of mosquito. There are tons of others. It is literally the most infinitely regressive argument that you could be going into if you're talking about we're not able to debate on the specific type of mosquito. You can make this argument infinitely regressively and never the second argument you can just check it back, mate.
Point of order. This new articulation on infinite regress is new. They never provided specific examples of phylum, etc. in the 2AC. This is new. Encourages sandbagging. It's about debate.
So he read infinite regression with the analysis underneath it that there's any number of both plural words and types of mosquitoes that could be interpreted under the under their interpretation, and this is an extension of the number of different types of mosquito is infinitely regressive under their definition. Right, it's not new in the AR. Which means that it's probably not infinitely regressive at the point, which means that it probably is super, it checks back for infinite regression because it
Just give a research burden education first.
All right, okay, let's go down the research burden. The first argument that you make is that the education is determined by unequal ground. The argument over here is that you do have access to equal ground, and in fact your ground is fair. You have substantive high quality ground. Our interpretation allows for that. Your interpretation does not, because it skews us of our entire app. The second argument is that you make is that you can't split the block. Our argument over here is that basically you can't split the block just doing Wang and Ryan's speech. The third argument that you make is that fairness is key to adjudicating truth. Our argument over here is that education is probably more important. So even if fairness is key to adjudicating truth, you should be looking to education first, because that is the main thing that schools will be funding debate through. If, you can still have debate even if you do lack fairness, just if the arguments aren't true. You, however, cannot have any education if you cannot have any debate if education gets undercut first.
He makes 4 fairness first arguments. Hit those.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay, group their fairness arguments. They get outweighed by the quantifiability of education. It is very clear to debaters when they're getting more education than when rounds are unfair. It is impossible to know based on the technical skill and the internal thought process of different debaters on what is fair to them and what is not fair to them, which means it is impossible for you, the judges, to ever be voting on any fairness standard because you don't know what is affecting us. Fairness is something that affects the debaters over here.
No, this is, I think, whatever.
Yeah. What's up?
This fairness is not a voter argument is entirely new. So we said fairness is a voter on the 1 and C. The 2AC didn't say anything about fairness is not a voter.
This
You can do weighing, but you can't say fairness is not a voter.
This isn't fairness is not a voter. This is you should be weighing education first because it is identifiable and quantified. So because of those two reasons, you should be weighing education first before fairness. That's this extension of that articulation.
Okay. Under consideration.
Yeah. Which means you should be looking at education first, because it is very clear, because we are speaking to you, things that we are learning in this round, what types of things we are learning or not. That means that it is very easy for you, the judges, to understand what education is being had through debate instead of what fairness is being had, because that's internal to us, and you can't just presume what is being learned over there. Which means that in any situation, you should be weighing education over fairness first. You should also be airing AF because of the block